Hey there, RC Girl here. Do you have an Axial Base Camp? If so, this upgrade is for you. Today, we're going to be installing the new Dig conversion for the LCXU transmission in the Base Camp. This quick upgrade provides an on-the-fly increase in your turning radius when you really need to get out of a bind on the trail. In this video, we're going to talk about what you need for the install, walk through the step-by-step install process, and show it in action. Stay tuned. There we go. If you guys are new to my channel, welcome. I'm all about helping people grow in the remote control hobby. So if you don't want to miss my future videos, make sure to subscribe. And also a huge thank you to my patrons on Patreon. I am planning the next stage of the hobby shop tour. Since I've been doing this full time since January, your support really helps the RC Girl channel grow. So thank you so much. So first off, the Axial Base Camp came out about mid-2022 last year. I did a full review and run video on that. I will link that up here if you want to check it out. This truck is a more streamlined version of Axial's SCX10 III platform, so it doesn't have 2-speed, it doesn't have Dig yet. But today we are going to be installing Dig. So first off, what is Dig? Why Dig? Do you need it? Typically these trucks are four-wheel drive, but when Dig is engaged, you can lock out your rear axle with just front-wheel drive, so your rear wheels are locked, letting you pivot basically on a dime. So if you're out on the trail, you really need to make a tight turn, you can engage Dig and increase your turning radius very drastically. The new LCXU Dig Conversion Kit comes in at $44.99, so a very affordable upgrade. You do also have to pick up a micro servo. They recommend the Spectrum SX10 I've had a couple issues with those. I'm actually going to be installing a Power Hobby 59 milligram servo, a little bit of an upgrade. Spectrum one's around 17 bucks. So all in all, this upgrade can be installed for around $65 total. All right, so what do you need for the install? I think the whole install process, if I wasn't filming, would take about an hour, hour and a half, maybe a little longer depending on your skill level. But what you need for this as far as tools, you're going to need just a 1.5 millimeter and 2 millimeter hex driver. Electric one will speed up the process drastically. I have a Ryobi one. For electronics, as I mentioned, you're going to need a micro servo. It would have been nice if they allowed space for installing a full-size servo. One thing that's great about this kit is that they actually provide spare servo horn adapters for 25 tooth spline count servos, so you can use non-Spectrum servos. When I was building my SCX10 III kit, you could only use the Spectrum shift servos because the servo horn was proprietary, so they've opened it up to use other types of servos. Kind of nice. I'm going to be using the Spectrum DX3 transmitter, and we're going to walk through the programming to set your servo endpoints to get this to shift properly. If you have a different transmitter, look up your manual on how to set your servo endpoints. And then lastly, we're going to be using the stock receiver in the Base Camp, the SR315 3-channel receiver. It has one spare auxiliary port that we're going to be plugging our micro shift servo into. If you're already using up that third channel, you're going to need to upgrade your receiver to a 5-channel receiver. And lastly, all the hardware is included for the install. In the early run of these for the test samples, they had a couple issues with 4 of the screws not fitting properly. However, for the full production run, they have fixed that issue, so you shouldn't encounter any problems there. All right, so let's walk through the install process. I think there's around 7 steps. First, we're going to remove the transmission and motor assembly from the chassis and also disconnect our front and rear drive shafts. There are 4 screws on the bottom skid that we're going to remove. From there, we're going to flip it over and the transmission should just come right out. Next, we're going to remove the screws holding on the spur gear cover. We're going to remove the 2 screws holding on our motor. A good tip here is put the screws back where they came from temporarily so you know where they go. You always think you're going to remember where they go. Once everything comes apart, you forget. So it'll be a lot easier to reassemble. Next, we're going to remove the 5 screws holding on the transmission cover. We're going to remove the bottom gear set only, retain one of the bearings on one side. We're going to assemble the new gear set and install a new bearing on the new transmission cover. And then we're going to snap that all back in place, screw it together. Next, we're going to install the dig mechanism. There are 2 rods that slot in and a wheel mechanism and a little shifter here that toggles the gears between 2 different modes. We're going to snap in an E-clip to hold our shift mechanism in place. The last gear goes into place, and then we're going to screw the cover back onto the dig mechanism. Holding the shift rod in place with some pliers, we're going to screw on this little bracket here that attaches to our servo. Definitely time for a cupcake break between the next step. Our next step is to install our micro servo. We're going to install that on the metal servo plate. Screw on our 25 tooth servo horn and the servo saver. Screw that assembly to the transmission with the 2 provided screws. We're going to reattach our motor and set our gear mesh properly. Make sure that the gears still have a little wiggle room when you're setting your mesh, and we're going to reinstall the gear cover. Next, we're going to swap in our new drive shafts. We're going to retain the universals from the original shaft and make sure to put that onto the new ones. Reinstall that back on the transmission. Let's snap the transmission back into place, reattach it to our skid, and ta-da, we are good to go. Alrighty, so we have this all hooked up. We got our shift servo endpoints set properly. I'm going to show you guys how to do that in the DX3. Our first position, the arm's going to be all the way forward. That's going to be 4-wheel drive. And then our second position is going to shift, and that's just going to be front wheel drive with our rear locked. You can actually set this to 3 positions if you want, where you can have 4-wheel drive. Our second position could be front wheel drive with our rear open, and our third position would be front wheel drive with the rear locked. So totally up to you, but I'm going to keep mine in 2 positions. So let's walk through how to set that up with your DX3. There are 2 different modes for using the auxiliary. Momentary is where you have to hold the button down for it to be active, and then latching mode is where you press it and it stays in that position. So that's the one that we want, and the latching has 5 different positions you can set it to. We're only going to be using 2 or 3 if you want to use the lockout and the open rear positions. We're going to hold full right steer, full forward braking, and the bind button, and holding those down, we're going to power on the transmitter. It's going to make that little tone, and it's going to be purple here. So we know that we're in programming mode for our auxiliary. To get into latching mode, you're actually going to press A here. It's going to make a little tone. To set the positions of our servo, we're going to be using the steering rate dial here. We're going to set our first position first. We're going to set that with the arm all the way forward. We want to make sure to not overextend the servo arm, not put a lot of pressure on it. It has to be set in just the right position to engage the gears, but not overextend it where it's going to overheat and blow out your servo. And once you feel like you have it in the right position, press the bind button, and that's going to save that position. Perfect. Now we're going to set our second position. So now you're going to dial back. We're going to set the arm just enough where the rears are locked and our fronts are moving. If we're only using 2 positions, now is the time you're going to power off your transmitter. Otherwise, if you want to set the third position, press the bind button again. It'll save that second position. You'll do the same thing with the third one and power it off when you're done setting the third one, and it'll save those 3 positions. All right, we'll power it back on. Should have those settings saved. All right, first position. Second position. There we go. This may need a little bit of adjusting once you get your wheels on the ground. I drive around the house, shift a couple times, and make sure that the gears are engaging and nothing is binding up. And that is how you set your shift servo with a DX3. Now I want to show you guys what dig looks like in action. We're just on a cement driveway here, and I'm going to show you guys the turning radius with and without dig. So we're going to go full steer without dig. Kind of a big sweeping turn here. And then we're going to switch into dig. Switch out of dig. Drive on. Big difference. Definitely having your rear wheels locked is going to put a little bit more strain on your motor, I'm sure, but we'll keep an eye on that. All right, now let's see how this works on actual terrain. So we're going to try and turn around up here, first without dig and then with dig. So all in all, what do you guys think of Dig? Is it worth the upgrade to install in your Axial SCX10 III Base Camp? I think there are circumstances where it can increase your performance. There were times though where my front wheels would spin, my rears were locked, and the car would just not move anywhere. Rear wheel lock. My tires are too grippy. It actually just holds the truck in place. I think it also depends on the tires that you're running. I was running a 2S battery, so maybe a 3S with a little bit more punch would be better. Let me know how you guys think it performed. Shoot me a comment below. Hope you guys enjoyed that quick install process to upgrade your Base Camp with the new LCXU Dig Conversion. Make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss my next video, or see you later.